Welcome, my friend, to Next Level Change Success. I'm Therese Perez, a change strategist and practitioner with over 20 years of experience designing and delivering impactful change programs across various industries. In this podcast, I share real-world practical strategies to help you create and deliver positive change experiences, whether you're a leader, practitioner, or someone looking to bring new ways of working to life. In today's fast-paced world, change is constant. Here we focus on how you can put people at the centre of your change strategy, because people with a sense of purpose are the most important link in driving performance. So if you're ready to create meaningful change and achieve all the success that comes with it, keep listening. Together, let's change the conversation and take it to the next level. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Next Level Change Success. My name is Therese Perez and I'm the founder of myvirtualchangemanager.com. I'd like to acknowledge that I am recording on Dharawal country and pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians on the land on which I am recording and to elders both past, present and emerging. And today I'm talking about sponsorship, change sponsorship. I tend not to talk too much about this, which is probably a mistake on my behalf, but definitely when thinking about the change that you're introducing, the concept of sponsorship is almost a little bit misaligned often if there's projects. So sometimes the people who are introducing the change, so the leaders who are sponsoring it from a program perspective, so basically funding the initiative, oftentimes the focus is on getting them to talk about it. But the reality is, from a change perspective, the sponsorship model in that case is wrong. The sponsorship model you want are leaders who are the leaders in the impacted areas, talking just as confidently to the change, even more so than the leader who's funding it. And that tact and approach is how you set your change up for success. So let's take an example of I'm running a risk-based program. That risk program is sitting in the support services function. The biggest challenge that there is for that program is to have the business talk to the program as confidently as they can when it's a technical area. And that's a real challenge. That can be absolutely a challenge. But what you want to do is translate as a change practitioner, a change leader, a change influencer. If you're in charge of that piece of work, what you want to do is ensure that the way in which the change is framed is in the business context, and work with the leaders about what stories are best to bring to the fore, what are the relatable stories that the leaders can talk about and contextualize what they're trying to do from the risk perspective. And that is how the worlds meet, and that is how you set your program up for success in the best way. Now, as a change practitioner and someone who works a lot with leaders, one of the biggest challenges is to really have the leaders who might have the appetite. So you have to work with them around the story, around the change. The best thing is when a leader is enthusiastic about the change or understands the need for the change, so they're open to it and willing to provide you with some time to talk about it, you providing them with packs that they then tailor, that you work with them on tailoring, because one of the biggest things with leaders and sponsors is that they never have time. And so you want to make sure that you are doing 95% of the work for them in supporting how they can phrase the message, keep the message consistent, talk about the timing of the messages if there's a group of leaders who are all talking about the one change. And this can happen obviously in structure changes, and it's so critical because I have seen it in organizations and witnessed when one particular area just happens to go ahead of the timing of other areas. So they go and communicate because they had a town hall and they for their department or division and they wanted to share the information. But then people are using their smartphones to take a photo of what's being shown, and then it goes viral across the organisation. because nothing is confidential, regardless of whether it's explicit that things are confidential. That only really happens at the senior ranks of an organisation, certainly not as soon as you hit middle management, because of relationships and because of the human element where people want to share the information and say, don't tell anyone, but they'll share the information. So you need to be really aware of the virality of communication in that aspect, even though you're thinking it's a face-to-face session and there's no recordings, is that it takes nothing for someone to sneakily use their smartphone nowadays to record things. So you do want to make sure that you're understanding that, acknowledging that, and prepared for that. So there are a few things I want to talk about of what not to do when you're trying to engage your sponsors. Now, I don't think that this is something that I've done poorly at, but certainly there's something about how you can always improve on how you're engaging with leaders, how you get your rhythm, and there are some no-nos when it comes to sponsors. So don't assume that good leaders leaders that you hear are good with their team, that they know how to manage change or they know how to lead change. And you don't want to take them through an academic exercise. They get really annoyed if you start talking to them in theory. You want to find out where they're at, find out what channels they have, what meetings they have with their team, where would they think it appropriate this could be communicated, what's the timing of this, who's in charge of the pack that the leader might use, so that you can put 1 or 2 slides into that pack. You can take them through it. You can set up a session before the actual session itself just to walk them through it, so that if they had any questions that you can work through it. Some may just say, send me the pack, and that's okay. And so you need to make sure that you respect the hierarchy and the way a hierarchy works. One of the biggest challenges from a change perspective, and some HR business partners would attest to this, is that senior leaders or leaders who have been in those roles for quite a while, it's like in Australia we'd say, don't tell me I know boats. So it's a bit of, and that was an ad in the 70s, probably in the 80s maybe, where a guy was like, don't tell me I know boats, and people were like, yeah, but you have to, and he's like, don't tell me I know boats, and then he would go out in the boat and it would sink, and the people would be like, you should have just taken some advice. So this is one of those cases. You might have leaders who do not want any advice, they don't want to work with anyone on it, they just want the pack, and they'll just read the pack, or someone can just come and present. And so some may abdicate that responsibility, and that has to be okay, because from a hierarchy perspective, these senior leaders are higher up on the ladder. I'm not going to waste my breath in arguing with them. I'm going to suggest, I can help, I can offer help, but I'm not going to tell them how to do things. That typically is not how it works unless they are open to it. And yes, absolutely, there are leaders out there who ask and say, Therese, how would you like me to approach this? Is there something you need from me? Just reach out and let me know, and I take them up on that offer and make sure I follow up on that enthusiasm. And good leaders and charismatic leaders are sometimes not the best change leaders, because they may wing it, they may miss out on messaging, they may overpromise on things, and so that absolutely can happen. So don't equate charisma to effectiveness. Some of the best leaders are less charismatic but very pragmatic and have the respect and trust of the organisation or the team, and so therefore they're always effective. So it's important to not make assumptions in those areas. Also know that leaders, whether it be middle managers or senior managers, I treat them with the same level of respect. I know that senior leaders have a different lens of the world and a different need and a different communication style. So therefore, I'm going to make sure I adapt accordingly to the audience, as you would any communication or any meeting. It's part of understanding how to position yourself professionally. A little bit of it is sometimes waiting until you're spoken to in case you have your leader in the room or another senior leader in the room who may not want you to dominate the conversation. And to be honest, dominating a conversation is simply not my style. So for me, it's about the listening, the inviting, the ensuring that the power is where the power needs to be so that no one feels threatened in a situation, and that if there's anything you want to point out, potentially it's a question and a curiosity that's expressed to have a look at a certain area or consider a certain scenario. I do find scenarios and working with sponsors around different examples of, okay, well, let's just, if you're thinking about communicating the town hall, potentially the only issue with that is that the other area or the other leader hasn't spoken to their people yet. So is there any way or any other opportunity that we might have where we might have to set up a separate session? So those type of things I highlight because no leader wants to look silly. And part of my role in that engaging of sponsors is to ensure that that's not the case. So ensuring I'm managing risk across timing, across who are the doers. Typically, especially at senior levels aren't creating slides themselves. They're receiving them, but they might have a trusted person that they want to look at it. So asking them for a nomination of who I can work with in your area, or is it with you directly? So a lot of it is the conversation to build rapport, get roles and responsibilities really clear, understand their environment, their world, how engagement works in their world. And then also if you have the opportunity to understand what's happening within their team from an engagement perspective, it gives you an idea around resistance that might sit within a particular area or not, and that comes down to heat mapping. But definitely sponsors, I feel, and leaders in general respect when someone comes to them, is curious about their area, wants to engage with their area and work with their area. And this is where the approach, I always talk about the approach, is what sets you up for success. So going in and doing kind of the I'm going to interview you concept doesn't really work. It's about understanding, telling them about your background, if you've worked on a similar change before, what you've been across, how you approach things, how you work is always helpful. What you might know a little bit about the area, who you've met in the area already, where you're up to around understanding that, and then asking them about channels, their preferred ways of working, so that they're in control. And that's really, really important when it comes to leadership. The other thing is be prepared for meetings, especially with senior leaders. Their time is so precious that if you're not asking them for a decision or if you're not asking them for input, etc., then you'd have to question why you're meeting with them in the first place. If they're wanting an update, that can happen in all different ways and via different channels as well. So you just want to make sure you're not exhausting their enthusiasm by wasting time so that you're always moving things along. That's always important, to be honest, at all levels, but definitely with senior leadership as well. As you go along and build rapport with the leaders, one of the things you'll understand is their strengths and then the areas that they're not particularly strong at. So I talked before about charisma and also about pragmatism, and some leaders will be stronger in some areas than others. And what you want to do is be able to adapt your approach. So if someone's a really good presenter and they like to do slides, they're all into the creative side, then making sure that their pack looks really creative, looks good. Sometimes leaders are more attached when they see a pack around the visuals. They may provide really good suggestions, and I think that's one of the best things about engaging with leaders is they often will have opinions or views which will improve the overall approach and product, which is great because they know their business. And so working in with their preferences but also understanding their strengths and supplementing those from a change perspective is really good and powerful. The best kind of leaders are the ones who are really up for understanding that they play a key role in the change. And some may object Some may not want to even go on the journey. And so what you need to do is discern on who you're going to invest in and ensure you don't over-invest in those who are resistant to the change. Because the reality is unless their area is really heavily impacted, and if you find the leader's not really on board, typically if you can ask them if there's someone else who they want to nominate because their time's so valuable, who do you want to nominate to work with me on the piece of work, it just means the job gets done. Because you can't expend time and energy trying to win people over on the change, as it is actually moving through by social pressure, by take-up and adoption that happens across the organisation. Leaders are sometimes just dragged through, regardless of whether they're big fans of the change or not. So you really want to use different tactics and methods, such as I mentioned about getting a nominated person, having that person on board, being able to play back where things might have been changed or where you might have adopted a bit of a different approach based on that feedback, just starts to get them into that neutral space. And sometimes that's the best that you can do with some leaders who may not agree with the fundamental direction of the change or the direction that the organisation is taking. The reality is that anyone who sits in that space over time, they'll gravitate away from the organisation. They'll probably end up leaving if they're not happy with the direction the organisation is headed. And that's okay too. Part of it is just being able to manage through that if that happens during your change, which I've also had the wonderful experience of needing to do extra hours to get a new leader up to speed and just across the line. And I always talk about the fact that success in change is in degrees. And so when it comes to leadership, and especially if you've got broad change then and transformational change, which is enterprise-wide, you will get degrees of success in various business areas because of the effective leadership as one of those areas that does need focus and does need energy invested into. Let's just wrap it up a little bit of a summary of what we've covered today. Don't assume that good leaders understand change, but don't take them through an academic process. Be very pragmatic about your approach, the rhythms, the channels. Talk to them about it, how they would like to approach the change with their teams. Remember that the project sponsor is not your change sponsor. So the banker in the project, so the person funding it, is not necessarily the one that you want to be able to speak to the change. It's the leaders across the organisation if it's enterprise-wide, and especially if you're in a support services function. You want to make sure that those areas impacted are talking about the change and the leaders are comfortable with it, they're informed about it, and they have an avenue in which to raise questions and get answers to help lead it. Remember that hierarchy matters in organisations, whether they're formal or informal. No matter how flat the structure is, there is always a power dynamic in organisations. You want to respect that. And you also need to ensure, because this is one of the areas when it comes down to adaptability of change, is that if a leader makes a poor decision about how they want to communicate the change, they might say, I just want to send an email. I don't want to have briefings. Accept the decision. That's a leader's decision. It's their business and they live and die by the sword. So if their area doesn't succeed in adoption and if you've got your success measures in place, well, you know the difference in the communication and change method. And so you can play that back if there's low adoption. Let them have the lesson rather than try and tell them they're a leader. So a little bit of it is have the respect for the position. And then make sure that you don't waste their time. So be prepared, make sure that you know the focus of the session. If you actually realise that it's not worth having a meeting on this, I could just send them an email. Send them the email so that you can get guidance if you need to, rather than have meetings. It may be far more effective. So a couple of key things, actually a number of key things when it comes to sponsorship and change sponsorship in particular. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it's valuable, giving you some insights, some practical things that you can do going forward with your change, or if you're planning some of the approach that you might take. And we're in the countdown down to the festive break, and I can't wait and have a bit of a holiday with my family and enjoy some sunshine and some beach time over Christmas. Definitely looking forward to that with loved ones. But come to myvirtualchangemanager.com, sign up for our newsletter, stay in touch, because we've got a few things really starting to ramp up for 2026. 2025's been quite a funny little journey, I think, in a lot of ways, both professionally and personally, and I'm really looking forward to 2026. Always like to be prepared, get a run into the end of the year for next year, so that when I have a break, I don't have to start thinking about, I don't leave it till 2026 to think about these things. I think part of it's working in projects, but also goal setting, etc., and the methods I like to have in my life. So we've got a lot of things happening in 2026. So come and subscribe so that you can stay informed about what's going on. And if you're looking to upskill and change in 2026, there'll be a lot of opportunities to do so with my virtual change manager. Have a great day, and just remember that change matters because your people, your organisation, your purpose, and most of all, you matter.